rights abuse. Is this something you're faulting in the process of how the courts arrived at the death sentence penalty, or they're just faulting the fact that the governor, at the end of the day, had to sign the warrants for these people's execution? What exactly they're faulting, I'm still at a loss. So I think that it would also be in their favor if they can, put the arguments out there as to what exactly their grounds is, and then maybe the state can look at it and consider. But if you hear what the Attorney General of Edo State said, you will say this kind of offenses happened. Somebody killed a baby, poured acid in a baby's mouth. I mean, how do we begin to justify that kind of mentality only and simply because the tradition says you can't have children outside of wedlock? Did you not know that before you engaged in acts that could produce a baby? There's certain things that you're at a loss, really. So I think the Amnesty International should look at the matters themselves and, state very clearly what exactly their grounds is. What exactly, are they faulting the process through which the court arrived at that sentence, or are they faulting the state governor for signing it at all? I have to get the argument right.
Let me read this. It says, over 60% of the world's population live in countries where executions take place. Yeah. Even though the United Nations had adopted in 2007, 2008, 2010, a non-binding resolution calling for global moratorium on executions with a view to eventual abolition. Now, that's a United Nations thing.
Yeah, but at the moment, 58 countries practice it in the world. 58.
Well, there's
Did we sign that moratorium?
Even those who signed it.
Because the matter now is this. The Attorney General, that's very important, because the Attorney General of the Federation is saying that they have absolutely no control over the states. The states have their laws.
It's their decision.
It's their decision. So if the states take that, so that I'm wondering if Nigeria were to be a signatory to that moratorium on, death penalty for a period of time, would that also be binding on the different state governments considering how we're structured?
See, the moratorium it's not yet abolished. It's an eventual abolition. Maybe that'll take another 10, 15 years.
It should be on right now.
It's on right now. But the thing is, if we want to look at it from the other side, from the holy books, I mean, there are punishments for certain crimes committed. These people were not just punished because they were walking the streets. They took lives. If you listen to the Attorney General of Edo State, he talked about what they did, the crimes they committed, why they had to be punished the way they were punished. If you take a life, I mean, you willfully go ahead and take a life because you want to acquire wealth, or you kidnap another person and kill the person, or even if you don't, like in Bayelsa State, I think one of their law there is that if you kidnap, is the capital punishment. Yeah. So if you decide that, okay, I am God and I'm going to take a life, why should you have your own life? Yes, God is a God of a second chance. But why should you have your own life if you can take another person's life?
So that's a big question then. So what punishment will be commensurate, to use that word,
and guess
for
what?
one who takes life?
And guess what?
Is that the issue?
Despite the punishment. The funny thing is that the criminals know that they are punishment for the crimes they commit. But yet they still go ahead and commit them.
So what could be the deterrent then?
Okay.
Well, the AGF and some other matters are raised in this report, which we should see now.
The 4 prisoners were executed on Monday evening in Benin City after having been convicted of various crimes ranging from armed robbery, rape, and even murder. Their conviction raises concerns, particularly by Amnesty International and the Legal Defense and Assistance Project, LEADER. The organizations contend, among other things, that their appeals challenging the signing of their execution warrants are still pending in court. They also made a case for Nigeria to follow the global trend of condemning capital punishment and instead observe a moratorium. The Attorney General of Edo State, however, insists that the 4 convicted persons were tried, found guilty, and convicted by a high court, with their sentences upheld by the Supreme Court, a process he says involved not less than 11 judges. He gave an insight into the crimes committed by the convicts.
Daniel Usofo, one of the persons convicted, entered a vehicle from Ekma to Iho with 2 others and a lady called Maria Limariagbe. At about 7:15, the vehicle they disembarked from the vehicle at Iho. And then they got this Maria Emaragbe, strangulated her, killed her, and collected her money. Chima Ejiofor was a spare parts dealer in Benin here. He had a relationship with a woman that led to the birth of a baby. The baby was 2.5 months old. He came to visit the baby and the mother in their house, gave money to the mother to go and buy Coca-Cola. And before she came back, poured acid into the mouth of the baby. Of course, the baby died. And what was his excuse? He didn't want to have a child. He said he's a first child in his state of origin, and first child, and as a first child, he's not expected to have a child out of wedlock. Osaemida Agokian went into a bush. He said he saw a big deer, and he shot at the deer. The deer died. He went there and he started butchering the deer. While butchering, the deer turned to a human being. He didn't stop to say, oh, the deer has turned to a human being. Let me run to the village. Come and see the eighth wonder of the world. The deer has turned to a human being. He kept on butchering. He cut the human being into small parts and buried the several parts of the bush.
On the calls by Amnesty International and other groups for a moratorium on death penalty, the Attorney General says the calls are misplaced and attention should instead be focused on the reforms of the criminal justice system.
I am against the death penalty, but the advocacy of Amnesty International and the advocacy of the civil society organizations here should be directed towards amending our laws. As we speak today in Edo State, there are 3 offenses that carry death penalty. The first is murder under Section 319. The second is armed robbery. The third is treasonable felony. And when a person is charged for armed robbery or any of these 3 offenses, the judge has no discretion. He must impose a sentence of death because that is the law.
Most of the issues involving death sentences are state offenses. We cannot, in operating a federation, impose on the various states how to run their laws. But we'll continue to engage them, we'll continue to partner with them, and continue to see what can be done to make them buy into the issue of abolition.
The Special Advisor on Media to Governor Oshiomhole has explained that the governor only signed 2 warrants of execution, while his predecessor signed the other 2.
Since they deny other persons from living, they too have to face the law.
A civil society activist, David Ugolo, who says he has been a victim of a weak police investigation after having been framed up for the murder of Comrade Olaitan Oyeride, a personal aide to the Edo State governor, wants the country to address what he calls the skewed Nigerian environment, which encourages crime and works injustice against the poor.
We are saying that there are underlying factors that are responsible for some of this widespread crime in the country, like poverty, like corruption, like impunity. We, civil society, are saying that we're not being pushed by any international community. These are things we think that there are opportunity for a change.
Meanwhile, a 5th convict is said to be awaiting execution by firing squad in Edo State, following the lack of facility by the prison authorities to carry out the execution.
Well, the debate will always go on, but you heard the comments of the AGF. But before that was that of the AGF Attorney General of the state, who did say 3 things. One in this country was treasonable felony. So when the AGF talks about it's a federation, the states, you can impose something on the states and so. But if you look at treasonable felony, well, doesn't that also...
As a federal law?
That's a federal law also. And so it kind of gives you the impression that is the FG trying to exonerate themselves, and I'm not sure if that's what it is, especially if you remember the president's comment not long ago about signing or the death penalty matter. But it all keeps going back and forth. Some did say, well, even if Amnesty International hears the kinds of crimes that were committed there, who knows? So would they still listen to all of those and insist on that position? Well, just go ahead and give your 2 cents of all of the goings on here. We'll appreciate hearing from you lot. Well, let's turn the page now to something else. Well, a bit of politics today. Yes, you remember the Nigeria Governors Forum still bickering over